We had a session at the Ebony Center to look at the operationalization of the auctioning of the dollars at the central bank. There were three main presenters. The main presentation by Dr. Timo Diego from the World Bank focused largely on the theoretical underpinnings and the practices of auctioning, especially how interbank markets work in the world and in different contexts.
The existence of interbank market facilitates foreign trade, and I can just give an example. For example, if we have a South Sudanese importer who is intending to purchase some merchandise invoice in Japanese yen, right, from a Japanese exporter, they have that relationship. Somebody in South Sudan and another person is in Japan. So in this case, what will the South Sudanese do? They will contact their own bank and try to find out what is the exchange rate between the South Sudanese pounds and the Japanese yen, right, before they conclude the transaction. So it depends. If the South Sudanese importer accepted the exchange rate which was indicated by his or her bank, then the transaction can go ahead. So his account will be deposited. If they have agreed that yes, you do this on my behalf, then his account will be deposited with the amount of the goods to be imported. And then we are expecting the South Sudanese bank will have a corresponding bank also in Tokyo or wherever in Japan. And then the local bank here will instruct its corresponding bank to debit its corresponding bank account with the appropriate amount and credit the Japanese exporter's account in that particular bank. And then the importer bank on its own, it will debit its account or its books in order to offset the debit of the South Sudanese importer's account. And this will show that there is a decrease in the correspondent account's balance. So as you can see, no physical money moved South Sudan. It's only the commodity. And if you look at the nature of behavior of those who are involved in the interbank trades, the majority of it is either it is speculative or arbitrary transactions. Okay, so they're just trying to find out what is going to be the future direction of price movements in the one currency. And I guess probably this is what is being observed by some of the commercial banks and other companies that are operating in South Sudan when the auction, initially when the currency was, or when we moved out of the fixed to the floating exchange rate with the devaluation, and then later on the auction process. It's not just taken as it is, but it's an opportunity for them to understand what is going to be the direction of the policy going forward. But this may not be the case in our situation, because if you look at South Sudan as developing economy, or including the emerging market economies, in most cases the foreign exchange markets are categorized as shallow and efficient because they largely rely extensively on foreign exchange regulations. So this is broadly about the market. Now let's have an idea about who are the participants in the foreign exchange market. As I indicated already, commercial banks are major participants in the foreign exchange market, and really they are the center of foreign exchange market. So we find that the vast majority of foreign exchange transactions involve the exchange of bank deposits denominated different currencies, like the example I gave between South Sudan and Japan. Because if you are having the same currency, then there is no point of exchanging. You are exchanging simply because the transactions are denominated in different currencies. So sometimes you need a middle currency like the US dollar. So they enter routinely into the foreign exchange market to meet the needs of their customer, primarily corporations, because we don't expect commercial banks to be needing foreign exchange for themselves. In most cases, it is on behalf of their clients who could be importers or those who are involved in other commercial activities. The final participant is the central bank, okay? And conventionally, central banks sometimes intervene in foreign exchange market and attempt to influence the price of its own. Meaning that the intervention in most cases of the central bank is about the value, because it's about price stability. It's not the stability of the prices of commodities and goods, but also the stability of the domestic currency. That's why the central bank comes in based on their observation about the value of their currency. They can come in order to buy or in order to sell, depending on the objective. So either they want to decrease the supply and thus increase the value, or they could be intending to sell in order to increase the supply and then lower the price of the commodity. So what are the transactions? Thank you, Ajak, you're following me very systematically. So either that you have spot transactions, right, on the spot, okay, which require almost immediate delivery of foreign exchange. If commercial banks enter into spot exchange, the expectation is that the delivery of foreign exchange should take place, but there are some other procedures that will delay the immediate delivery of foreign exchange. For it, even in the banking system, it takes about 2 days. So normally, this is the standard time required for a transaction to be complete. And normally, this is what they call value date, the date of the deal. So if we look at the proportion of spot transactions compared to other transactions, it is about 43% of all the transactions that are happening in interbank foreign exchange market. The second category is what we call forward transactions. And in this case, it's not immediate like the spot transaction. It requires delivery at a future value date of a specified amount of one currency for a specified amount of another currency. So if you look at the quotations, okay, I have explained this earlier, maybe in a different way. Normal, the quotations are bid and ask, okay? A bid is the exchange rate in one currency at which a dealer will buy. So the bid is for the buying, like in the case of the auction. Commercial banks are asked to indicate the bid rate. That means the rate at which they are willing to buy foreign currency from the central bank. But at the same time, they are also expected to indicate the ask, or sometimes they call it the offer, okay? And this is the rate at which they are willing to sell other currencies. And so you will see the dealers, they buy at the bid and then they sell at the ask or the offer. So normally they are not the same. The bid rate is different from the ask rate, and in most cases they make profit, because in most cases the bid is less than the ask price. And what is causing the spread, the difference between the bid and the ask, is largely associated with two factors. The first one is the transaction cost involved, because it involves transaction costs, and also it can be caused by the dealers because they are also financial intermediaries. They want to run away with something, and then plus the profit margins. So this makes the difference between the bid and the ask private. Fourth, I think I should say thank you. I welcome comments.
Thank you, Kimo.
Then there was a presentation by Moses Mapour, who is the chairman of the auctioning committee at the central bank.
The topic is good. Now we have gone through the theory. Let's now look at the practice. And Moses Mapour will walk us through, I think, of the 3 auctions they have done so far. They will tell us to what extent they conform, or they have conformed to what Dr. Kimo was just talking about. I've also asked him to give us a brief overview of what is happening next door in Uganda, because also Uganda is very much into the interbank market, is functioning well, and it shows to some of my colleagues in Juba and South Sudan especially, who expect results overnight. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. And especially myself, I was involved with the Ugandan experience when I was at the World Bank in the late 1990s. And we used to go to have a dinner in a restaurant. We carried literally bags of shillings just to go and buy. We are not yet there, because I think Governor Koram Didier and his team, we should give them credit. Hopefully they are stopping that part so that it will not reach that level. But Uganda is now doing very well. And when they came in May, they did mention, they said, well, you have some of your guys who are helping us when we are going through this. Are you making use of them? The answer now is yes, because we are working closely with the central bank. Spencer is somewhere there, Peter Bian, and Dr. James Zalik, and Dr. Marial from the university, who couldn't make it this morning. We are trying our best. It's not easy, but we need to stay the course. So Moses, walk us through. You have a difficult job, but also know that you have some professional support somewhere. And hopefully with those of Taban around here, you will get also political support very soon, so that when you have a government, national unity, there will be a consensus on economic policy, which will bail us out of the situation we are in. But it's not yet, we have not yet reached the level of Uganda at the time, or even the level of Zimbabwe. God forbid we should really prevent it, because since we know what has happened there. So, Moses, give him a hand.
Thank you, Dr. Alwal. First of all, I want to thank the Ebony Center for their continuous focus on the economic problems in South Sudan. Thank them for that. I don't have Moses Mahfoud. I'm a Director of Financial Markets in the Central Bank, Bank of South Sudan, and currently I'm the chairperson of the Foreign Exchange Auction Supervisory Committee. I will go into the process that we took as a mechanism at this stage to supply the market with the foreign currency. Our Monetary Policy Committee was following carefully what is happening in the auction and what might be the reason why the two rates, because when we started with the parallel market rate as our rate that day, the first day. But slowly, we noticed that the two rates are again diverging. The parallel market rate is going up more faster than our rate. So we thought that there might be some issue about the pricing. That is the rate the commercial banks put, that is the percentage that they put on the auction rate to determine the market rate. So the MPC decided to remove that that percentage, which was said to be 2%, such that the commercial banks can determine their own price without any intervention from the central bank. One, in order to unify the two rates, is we are not going to consider any bank applying or bidding for a higher rate. We will not consider it as an outlier. So any bank can bid as high as they like, but we are not going to abide by a uniform price auction. The rate you bid for is the rate you are going to pay. You will settle with that rate you bid for. So if you say you are bidding for 40, then we will sell you dollars at the rate of 40. We believe that this will unify the two rates quickly. And if they are unified, after unification of the rates, then the modality of intervention from the central bank can be determined from there. Like in Uganda, the Central Bank of Uganda will intervene in foreign exchange market when the movement is 10 shillings. Then the exchange rate is considered volatile and the central bank intervenes by selling. Plus or minus, yeah. So if it is 10 shillings more, they intervene by selling. If it is 10 shillings below, they will buy, they will purchase. But for us, since the two rates are not yet unified, it will not be practical to define the bank that the bank considers to be a volatile movement of the exchange rate. We have decided also to remove the reserve rate. So these are new measures the Monetary Policy Committee has decided to introduce to correct the path of the alignment of the reform exchange rate reform program. That is what we have done so far. So interbank, for that matter, will never flourish unless the two rates, so-called parallel rate and the future rate, are unified. From that time, we can talk of interbank market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moses. I hope you have taken note, because that one is the practical side of things, and also hearing it from the horse mouth. Peter Biar, I said before you came late, but you, I think you caught up with. You have a tough job of assessing the operationality of the interbank in South Sudan. Peter has also been with us talking to our colleagues at the Central Bank. Okay, he said he has slides. Okay, yeah. So Peter will, you know, the way we have arranged it. Dr. Chol and I, we took a back seat and we said, let the presentation be done by the midday generation of South Sudanese and sunrisers. So you see Kimo and Dr. Majak are midday, Moses and Peter are sunrisers. And then Dr. Chol and I we are sunset. Give a hand to Peter.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Luar, for that very kind introduction. And thanks to everybody for coming for this discussion. As you very well know, this is the big animal in the room in the country. This issue of what is happening in the foreign exchange market is to a certain extent a national security issue. So I'm glad that there are a lot of people taking interest in it and are willing to give their time and to learn about it and to continue to deliberate together so that we can move forward on it. My presentation, as Dr. Lual mentioned, is going to be evaluation of what has been happening over the last few weeks and how it could be improved so that the market can become more efficient and so that the two rates can converge. So I'm going to talk about 6 things. I'm going to give you a short overview of what was happening before the devaluation happened, because that background is very important in understanding the shortcomings that happened in the operations of the interbank market. The second part will be also to build on what Mahmoud mentioned about the demand structure. All of you know what happened with the revenues. The revenues completely collapsed as a result of the reduction in the production due to the conflict, and second, to the drop in the global prices. This is based on the data from October. What you see in the blue line is what is in the budget, the expected revenue that the government is expecting on a monthly basis to finance its expenditures. And what you see the red is the actual revenues that the government was actually able to raise. And this is combining the oil and non-oil revenues. So you can see there has been a big deficit for a very long time. All of you may be wondering how was this deficit financed? It was financed largely by printing money. So at one point, and over the duration of the last several months, the government was raising only between 25% to 30% of the amount that it is spent every month. 70 to 75% came from pure printing of SSP. It's important that we understand that. So what has that done? What that has done to the money supply was by money supply going up crazy to doubling within a very short time. So you have a money supply moving from the beginning of 2015 that was somewhere here, and we are way over there. So printing of money leading to the increase in the money supply, especially the South Sudanese pounds. Now that has a direct relation to what is happening in the parallel exchange market, in the black market, because there is more South Sudanese pounds that are available in the market, chasing fewer foreign exchange. And this is the same time where the revenues are reducing. So the money that is coming in on a monthly basis is much less. So parallel market has begun to go up. That has a direct correlation to inflation and what is happening with the prices. Because the same money that is being printed, that is increasing the money supply, that then is increasing the difference between the official market and the black market exchange rate, that then is entirely being fed into the prices. So you see the decrease in the purchasing power and the prices have been going up. This is basically what has been happening behind the scene. Fiscal deficit or fiscal crisis that the government was unable to handle. No political will either to reduce the expenditures or to think of ways to increase the revenues, but none of that was done. Expenditures continue the same way, and there's no revenue. The short and simple and the easiest thing to do is to print money, which our government did and has been doing. It's likely actually to get worse this month. We have been printing about 700 million SSP per month up to now, and that's when the oil was still giving us between 100 million and 40 million. Now we are getting between 30 and 20. So you see, in the next month, there will be more printing, more increase in the money supply, more inflation. Basically everything that you have seen is going to go up. At the same time, foreign exchange has been decreasing because the Bank of South Sudan was trying to defend a rate that was very artificial, highly overvalued, no basis for it, but it was willing to spend foreign exchange to defend that rate, which actually encouraged this black marketeering that Mahfoud was mentioning. Because if you have a luck of getting dollars at the 2.96 and you can sell at 18 point whatever, of course this is amazing, you make a lot of money, but what is happening is the foreign exchange were being depleted. So you went from having nearly 2 billion at the time in 2012 to basically, as we speak now, well, let me not disclose that, but it's quite bad, okay? So this is basically what has happening along the way. So no foreign exchange to speak of. So when we did the devaluation or the change of the exchange rate regime, it was something that was forced upon the government. It was no longer really an issue of choice. Foreign exchange was being depleted, and we were reaching a tipping point where the government would be unable to do anything whatsoever. So that is what has been happening behind the scene. At the same time, we know how our economy is like, and we know the demand of the foreign exchange. On the first part is the issue of imports. We're a country that is overly dependent on imports. We rarely produce anything. Even those who are producing subsistently, producing food or raising cattle, most of them were displaced during the conflict, the 2-year conflict we were having. So we had nearly 2.2 million people displaced that were producing, that then were no longer producing. So that increased even the potential for imports, because now people need more food, need more assistance. So imports is a big factor. But at the same time, the dollars that are accruing are unable to meet the demand of the imports. The second is the foreign travelers. And by the way, with the government, this is amazing. You will have 40 people will go to New York City for like 2 weeks, and they will pay themselves, I don't know, a lot of money, and then they will come back and think immediately of the next delegation, the next destination to go to. They will go again, come back. This has been amazing. If you look at the share, the foreign travel as a share of the total expenditures in foreign exchange, this is crazy. But this is one of the sources that has been happening. Medical. Everybody who has a headache wants to go to Uganda for treatment. The same thing with school. We are all in foreign schools. Housing. Everybody have their families in Uganda. You make money here, send there. So this is only a place where you make money. So these are the demand that are existing, that are normal in many places. Another thing that Mahfoud mentioned before is what has been happening with the companies. A few months ago, I think 2 months ago, I met with all the heads of the commercial banks in South Sudan. And they were telling me that a lot of companies were holding a lot of SSP. So the deposits increased. And this was, by the way, at the time when the difference between the black market and the official market was really diverging. So a lot of these people that were earning money, especially airlines, insurance companies, banks, whoever, contractors that were getting money and were being paid, were keeping all their money in SSP. I think some of them were hoping that at some point the rate will go down, and therefore they will turn their money into dollars and repatriate it to their countries. That did not happen. And all these huge SSP are sitting there,
Many of these companies have seen now that South Sudan is no longer profitable as it used to be, so they want to take their money out. And these guys are willing to buy SSP at any rate. And I think that is, dollars at any rate. And that's what Mahmoud mentioned before. It's a real problem. When you have people that are willing to buy at any rate, that's a real problem. So that has been happening. And as he mentioned also, foreign exchange market becoming a source of employment, because you have a huge population that has been displaced from their villages. They move to a place of safety and they have nothing to eat. And then there is this black market thing that is happening. How would you not expect them to go and get something there? So these people have been entering this market as a way of survival. So they go there, buy dollars, everybody become like a dealer. So it's part of what is artificially inflating the demand of the foreign exchange. And then of course there is pure speculation. And this is to be expected. In every environment where government create a room for private entities to make profit through the sale of dollars, foreign exchange, or any sort of price arbitrage, you have to know for sure that people are going to take advantage of it. People like George Soros became billionaires by benefiting from government like ours. For his case, it was Mexico who was doing the kind of policies we were doing. And he came there and he saw a huge opportunity and he made a lot of money. So there's speculators that have come here, people in finance that understand this better than anybody in the government, and they are willing to get as much money as they can. Now, let me get a bit to this restriction. These are restrictions that the Bank of South Sudan was placing on the banks. Mahmoud mentioned this reserve rate, but this reserve rate is calculated based on what is called indicative rate. So every morning, the commercial bank will report the rate. The central bank will ask them to report what is called indicative rate. This is the rate at which they were selling foreign exchange the day before. And they will submit these, and it's through these that the reserve rate is determined. Now what has happened is this. The banks will submit some rate, usually 19, 18 point something, to the commercial bank. And if you do go to the bank indeed, you will find this rate labeled somewhere that they buy at this rate, you sell at this rate. But if you actually ask, let me have the dollar, they will not give it to you. But somehow they were giving this rate to the central bank. And the central bank was using these rates to determine this reserve rate, and then it was placing on this 2% cap on the profits, that you cannot sell beyond 2% of the price from which you bought. So this basically made if you bought at 18, you have to sell between 18 point something, 19 point something. While the market is at 29, 30. So who is going to sell at that rate? No one is going to sell at that rate. And this is why when you go to the banks, you cannot find dollars, because there are others behind the scene who are willing to buy at a much higher rate. And then there were these outlier effects. There was a case where some banks bid at rates that are much closer to the market, but somehow they were removed, they were disqualified from the bidding process. So this actually sent a message to the banks that maybe the central bank want them to bid low, and that the bidding low was the way to go when the market is really going up. So it was actually doing the reverse. Instead of actually allocating to those who are bidding higher first, they were removing them, and this was a problem. And then there was this idea of unified auction price. They will collect all the different bids and average them and sell to everybody at that. And this, of course, is also part of the problem, because people should buy at whatever rate that they bid, because this is a capital markets. And in capital markets, you make loss. Sometimes you make loss, sometimes you make profits, based on the market and based on the quality of information that you have, and based on the quality of the analysts that you have that are giving you that information. So if you are bidding higher than the market, of course that is a loss. And this is why you see the Wall Street going up and down all the time. You can arbitrarily have everybody be making profit, and therefore everybody is cushioned, and you average the rate so that everybody make the same rate. And then finally, I think we need to rethink the assumptions that are being made that are underpinning monetary and fiscal policies. What has happened with the oil, is it a short-term shock? Is it a long-term shock? What if the prices of oil do not go back to 50? They will never go back to 100, definitely. But what if they don't even go back to 50? This will require adjustment to the size of the economy. And that adjustment also have implications to what sort of monetary and fiscal policies are pursued in South Sudan. In the past, we used to talk about monetary policy of a resource-rich economy. We need to re-examine this. Is South Sudan itself a resource-rich economy anymore? And should we think about monetary and fiscal policies along those frameworks, or should we need to think that South Sudan now is a very poor, small economy that is dependent on everybody else except itself, and we have to think critically about how to make it stable and how to attract investment into South Sudan. These are the few thoughts that I have with you, and I want to thank Dr. Lal for inviting me to this event. Let me also apologize that I'm going to be leaving shortly. I have to rush across to the British Council event, where I will also be speaking shortly. But thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Peter. There was a young man doubting, I think, at which, if you are listening, the economists have spoken. I think the politicians are the ones who are not listening. And we have research, as you have seen the young man showing it. So we have the data, we have all those things. Now, I asked Dr. Majak to pick wherever he wants to start and comment on the three presentations, and then we will open up a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lual, and thank you all the participants in this important workshop. I would like to underscore from the very start that the three presenters, Dr. Kimo, Moses, and BR, have highlighted a host of issues that are affecting our economy, ranging from complete disjunction in macroeconomic policy coordination and adherence to basic tenets of policy in both spheres. And I think this is where our biggest problem starts, because unless the two arms of macroeconomic policy are speaking to one another, there would always be a crisis. And I think this is what has bred a lot of risk in economic management in South Sudan. But let me take it a little bit to an extensive presentation which Dr. Kimo made with regards to interbank operations in any ideal and model economy. I was rest assured when Makur interjected and said, as a matter of fact, there is no interbank operations in South Sudan. The interbank market does not exist as a matter of fact. But that is how it is ought to be. I mean, if there was effective development of intermediation and deepening of banking and financial sector in the economy, the interbank market is critical. It's critical in terms of allocating resources efficiently, and in terms of embedding regulation and effective market behavior, including management of information asymmetries. I think, as a matter of fact, and when you are involved with modeling financial markets, you shouldn't be threatened about rumors and flow of information, because markets live on information and information gaps. and therefore, unless you are privy to this idea, you're capable of dealing with this kind of a challenge, you know, how to deal with information imperfections, you will not be able to manage the process of resource allocation effectively. So in markets that are efficient, it goes without saying that information is made available, and rumors are crowded out by providing actual information to the agents, so that there are no distortions in the process of transaction and in the process of exchange. Economic agents are rational, and they know that the kind of runaway inflation that we now have in our economy, you know, and the threats that we see in terms of possibility of currency crash can set fear and panic into the market, and the economic agents will rationally behave the way they are behaving. What is the rate? What is the actual market rate for SSP? It has been eluding us for the last number of years. We have been blaming the parallel market for distorting the price, when they were actually reading the market correctly and determining the price that should have been the real price of South Sudanese pound. So searching for that golden mean would require a lot of efforts, and it is premised on the extent of coordination between the Ministry of Finance and the central bank, and putting in place all those necessary measures that would help in curbing the inflation, and that would help in stabilizing the currency, so that the real exchange rate is determined based on actual market behavior. With this few highlights, I would want again to comment my colleagues, the three presenters. I think they have covered a lot of ground, and I have come only to make some summaries, and also highlighting certain areas where I think we should need to have our focus during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Majak. Now he was speaking his capacity as one of our monetary economists. Now, and welcome Dr. Lem. We started early as usual, so now we open up, give chances first to the young people. So because the future is yours, and whatever being discussed concerns you, and then we will let the elders later on respond to the end. The young man there, Michael.
When the economists are discussing, the good thing about them is that they don't agree on anything. And it reminds me of Paul Pyravan's theory of anarchism, anything goes. So I enjoyed the discussion. I want to make just one point. I want to be pedestrian in this discussion, because my experience of enjoying this, attending this discussion turned out to be a show of mind of how much we have read, and the discussion ended up being a discourse of elites, which is DPF is becoming an elites club. So I want to be pedestrian. I'm making just one point. And my point goes to Moses Marcoon. In as much as you have explained how the process of bidding and auctioning is done, I fail to understand, and I'm standing here to represent Mama, who is somewhere, maybe in Bubo or Chikan. What is the significance of auctioning the dollar in respect to our economy, specifically the running away prices? Because that's what they want to see. They want to see the prices in the market coming down, so that they know the government is managing their economy. And so that one day that government is going to ask their boards, they are going to say we will trust them back with our board because we know we are managing the economy. So I want you to explain the significance of auction, because we have been hearing 20 million, 30 million, but we're not seeing any changes. Thank you.
I have a question. I think it goes more to the banking sector. Why do we allow this ideology of opening up more banks, yet they do not meet the requirements for banking? Of all the banks that exist, even those who are currently in the auction, most of them do not meet the requirements. Some of them have not even paid the central bank what they need to year, but yet they continue to exist. Why don't we rather reduce banks that we have, or have banks merged to create stronger banks that are able to perform the functions banks should be performing in this country?
The issue of the devaluation of currency and the concern about the timing. There will never be a right time. To me, we missed the right time when the original intervention was shut down. That time, the spread between the official and the parallel market was very narrow, and we had reserves. And it depends, why do you devalue? Why do you auction?
Yes, I heard from this question that why do we auction and we don't see results? That is the meaning. You see, when we move from fixed to floating exchange rate, there was a big problem. And this problem, we were not choosing what to do. So you expect this thing to come in a later day. You don't expect to see it within the less than 2 months, then everything is done. Then the magnitude of the problem we explain to people will not be correct. There was also a question of whether it was too early to devalue the SSB. Actually, it was too late, as you heard it from. Yeah, it was too late. And I think the one that was rejected in 2013 was better. By that time, the parallel market was 4.5. People said no. Now, it was very bigger. It was too big to exist. And actually, dealing in foreign currency at some point this year was more profitable than dealing in drugs. Because you can get in $1 up to 20 pounds. Even people dealing in drugs cannot get such money. Someone was talking about a reversal. Reversal is not an option economically. Reversal or failure are not options. And if the reversal is done, then we have chosen collapse. I think that I have other senior officials here in the bank. They can answer the question of opening the banks which are not meeting the standard. I think that can be answered by someone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, very quickly, I think, well, with regards to why opening more banks, it's the nature of the market. This is a competitive market, and therefore entry and exit is driven by market forces. And so what I cannot say with authority is whether these banks are meeting capital adequacy requirement, or whether they are conforming with regulatory and statutory criteria based on the law, based on the Act of the Central Bank and other laws of the land. Deposit taking goes with lending, and I mentioned deposit mobilization because I don't see it really as the main motive of most of the banks. Yes, people do go to the banks, people do deposit money, but we have more money outside the banking system in the country. And if there was aggressive deposit mobilization on the part of the banks, I think a lot of this money would have gone into the financial system, and it would have been lent out to people who want to make businesses, and then the economy would have benefited quite a lot.
What I want to say is that the National Alliance has been calling all along for realignment of the exchange rate. Even at the time when it was shut down in Parliament, we were against it because we thought that having two rates always benefits a few people at the expense of the public. And I was even wondering whether it was a power of Parliament to decide on physical issues. Otherwise, it becomes a political thing, not an economic matter. But that's another matter. So we are for realignment. What we didn't like in what happened in that day was that the measures that were taken were not accompanied by other measures that will ensure a better landing or soft landing. Because we said, it was not a prediction, we said that if you just say you have floated the pound that is not based on anything, you don't have reserves as a bank, okay? There was even difference whether the float was controlled or not controlled. There was a discussion between those in government whether that is controlled or not. So we said that the immediate result will be hyperinflation. The prices will go up and the people will not be able to cope. So we should have taken measures regarding whether we have to do some subsidy of the essential commodities. Secondly, we were wondering when the auction was being done, is that was the purpose for the government to get more income from the dollar, or is it to control inflation? And the two are not necessarily the same. And now the representative of the bank says one advantage of the float was that the government now had more pounds. But that pound is equivalent to the old pounds. How much now the pound you have, if you have 30 pounds, it now will buy you something that you used to buy for 1 pound at that time. So it did worsen. If it is the issue was only for the government to get the money, and then you do some, you raise the inflation. Now, belatedly, they say they are raising the salaries of the low-income people by 300%. And then 300% means 3 times, because not everybody is a mathematician. 3 times, if I used to get 10 pounds, I get 30. But the price has gone by 600%, 6 times and more. Now the problem you are creating is that some of these lower income people, when you raise their salaries 3 times, they get more than the people who are ahead of them. At least those who are closer to the other ages, you talk up to 9. If you go to people who are 10 or 11, you find out that their salaries are being surpassed by the people who were behind them yesterday. Does it solve their problem? These are the kind of things we were discussing in our press statement and in our press conference, that yes, we are for realignment, but the realignment must be accompanied by certain measures that will reduce the impact of increased dollar value to the common person. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I will need to go here.
Yeah, we got the alliance. We got the national alliance going now.
Make use of the program of IMF trading with the neighbors, cooperation between the two policies. These are urgent issues that may prevent the crash of our SSP that was mentioned by Dr. Majak. Once again, I thank you for the center.
Thank you very much, Governor. We will conclude on the high table, but let me say IO is taking the petroleum docket. And if I talk of my experience in Khartoum, when I was both state minister and later on became also Minister of Petroleum, the economic team usually consists of those three. The Minister of Finance at the chair, the Governor of the Central Bank, and the Minister of Petroleum. In Khartoum, and I tried to advise my colleagues here, but they didn't take my advice. But I say, usually we used to meet every Monday, first thing, 8 o'clock. The Minister of Finance and his team, the Minister of Petroleum and his team, the Governor of the Central Bank and his team. Why Minister of Petroleum? This is where the money is coming from. So the economic team in other countries always meet on a weekly basis. In South Sudan, I don't know. We are closing. Sorry for those who have not talked. We will also allow people to talk over lunch. If you have urgent questions, please, there's an opportunity there also. Thank you.
One is this thinking that things could have been done better or could have been, the soft landing element of what Dr. Lam was talking about. And sometimes I feel people are not appreciating how bad things are. Because when you have no money, you are totally broke, and then people say you need to subsidize this. Of course, we know prices are all through the roof. But the first thing you have to do is what is within your means, what is within your control. You cannot imagine things. You have to do things that are physical and that are real. At the time when this decision was taken, we were in a very bad situation, and we are still in a very bad situation. There is Vision 2040 that imagines South Sudan in year 2040. But it's only imagined that end result. It has no strategy on how you actually reach there. Now we will be starting with peace and reconciliation and all of these things. So it's important that this vision be developed and be implemented. Thank you very much.
Simon, you want to sit or you want to? Okay.
Still have the energy.
Still have the energy.
Yeah, I have to address him because Peter is taller than me. Actually, I'm really impressed, and let's know that Manyok is taking notes, and normally at the end of each DPF event we expect one summary of the deliberation and also a policy note that we can take around and share it with the concerned institutions. I just wanted to comment on a number of issues. I don't want to go into the debate regarding the relevance of correspondent banks or having a clearing house at the central bank. Okay? But to me, having correspondent bank will make the process easier, because the clearing house is not necessarily for selling and buying foreign exchange, but the correspondent bank, corresponding account could be designated for that purpose. But again, as we have seen that we don't have an interbank foreign exchange market. So to me, what does it take to have this market operational? We have a number of institutional arrangements that have to be in place. We have capacity issues, the issue of training, some of us referred to, and also you need to have the legal and regulatory framework. We make these laws very, very simple. And I think I would want to share with the rest of us two things. One is the need for the coordination between the physical and the monetary authorities. And as long as this is one government, sometimes we find it very difficult to understand why. And this is what I told some people when we were organizing. I didn't attend because I had to leave for Washington last May, but I was part of the preparatory team for the discussion that brought people from Uganda and other neighboring countries to address the crisis we're having. And I was telling that will be the first time for the governor and the Minister of Finance to be under one roof. It has not happened before. And I was happy that it has happened, but we wanted to continue regularly if we adopt the idea which was provided by Dr. Lual, having an economic team meeting on a regular basis.
In this new arrangement of floating exchange, we don't actually have official rate. But the rates that are used by commercial banks, we collect that information and then we make an average that used to be our rate. So if the rate in the bank, the commercial bank rises, it is implied that our rate also will go up. So there is no formula, whether in mathematics or in econometrics, that if you put more values, you will get a less outcome. That is not there. You put higher values, you will produce higher results. So there is no formula whatsoever. You put 10, then you receive 1. So the average of what you put gives you the average. That is why our rate is rising, because we depend on the rate used by the commercial banks. The other issue is a certain bank was asking whether what I was saying here was the official declaration of the cancellation of what I talk about, like 2% or yes, I can say there will be no contradiction, but you know where you get and how you get your official announcements. Of course, we will meet with the MDs of and maybe dealers of the commercial bank in a meeting. It will be announced officially by the governor, and then anything that was communicated to you in a written form will be communicated in the same way. So anything that was given to the bank in a written form in terms of circular, there will be a new circular cancelling the first and giving you the new thing. So this thing has been done by a Monetary Policy Committee which determined these issues. It has already been decided. So there is no contradiction that is going to happen in between. But the formal way of communicating it will be through meeting or circular. And this may happen early next week. The other issue was, Dr. Lam was asking me why there was a choice, there was no soft lending. In fact, the reason for taking this measure, one of them was that there was no government, there was no money for the government. And that the subsidy was done through exchange rate. That means you give some companies or some people to go and import using the fixed rate, which was very low. And others were buying from the market and then bring goods. And all these goods were priced at the parallel market rate. So we said, okay, we are not going to do subsidies through exchange rate, but if the government is ready, if they have more money to subsidize other goods, that is their own problem. And in fact, they did with the fuel. Whether it is sustainable for the government to continue subsidizing that, or even to increase the subsidy list, that is their own problem. We are not telling people not to subsidize, but the subsidy should not be through the exchange rate this time. It should be through the budget, if you want subsidy.
And that economic turnaround, in my view, is anchored in the kind of political stability that we are going to bring to this country the soonest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you close. Thank you for your patience. And now is yours.
First of all, I have to thank you for attending patiently. It has been a very long session, but it's worth sitting because the presentation has been really very encouraging. It's astounding. I have to congratulate Dr. Kimo, Makur, Peter Bia, and Ganga God for the knowledgeable presentation. All the other representatives of the commercial banks, I've already thanked the politicians and all the other friends from foreign embassies. You, the young people, without you, the center is useless. As we have defined it, you are the sunrise generation, and it is really very nice to see you all here. I am mourning my son. He was a member of the sunrise generation, but seeing you gives me comfort. Thank you for coming. We will see you here more and more. And Comrade Taban, we do this once a month.